Testing. You say something?
Yeah, does that seem to be coming through?
Seems great.
Okay, well, let's try this. One of the things that interests me is the gap between text and thought, and particularly the structural differences between them. Text is a long chain or a long railway train of units of some kind, words, sentences, paragraphs, maybe segmented a bit, maybe cut up into chunks of various sizes, chapters, books, and so on. But humans still encounter it as a long, straight path to be walked
We
along.
have to move through it from A to B.
We have to move through it from A to B. Whereas thought is much more nested, much more recursive, more tree-like, or perhaps more net-like, like a fishing net, or a mycelial structure under the...
Everything can connect to everything.
Everything connected to everything, potentially. I mean, the structure in the mind, in the nerve cells, in mycelial cells, but it's not entirely tree-like in the sense that there may be short circuits, there may be loops. The tree has no loops at the leaves. You don't have one flower connected to another flower, or one leaf connected to another leaf. And I think that that gap between thought, the shape of thought and the shape of text, underlies a lot of the difficulties that kids have in schooling, that listeners have in listening, readers in reading, and so forth, because as you read through a sequence of sentences, you have to reconstruct something which is not linear, which is not a long line, which is nested, tree-like, recursive, and that's work. And similarly, when you're gathering your own thoughts, you've got to harvest from these very complex structures of thought into something linear, which can be converted into text. And the structure of text really hasn't changed since the beginning of the cities and the first cuneiform marks in clay.
And those marks were about record keeping, hey, rather
Those
than
started
actually...
with record keeping, yeah, absolutely. I mean, later on, stories intruded, as they tend to in technologies. Every new technology is begun by nerds who are doing something technical, and then sooner or later everybody else says, no, stories, please. That's very notoriously happened to film.
Yeah.
The first techies were doing funny sequences with dogs performing tricks or boxers in a ring, but the public said, no, stories.
Drama, please.
Houses
Houses on fire and
That's
love
right.
affairs.
Yeah, Hollywood and the rest. And so there are various ways, I think, in which you can help people to retrieve the structures of thought from text, or to encode more easily their own thoughts into text. But we're obviously living in a very special moment now, because there's a lot of excitement about what people call artificial intelligence, but more specifically these large language models like ChatGPT, Gemini, OpenAI's Claude, etc. And it may be that there's a sort of a feeling around that a lot of the difficulties of dealing with text are vanishing or becoming irrelevant. So, for example, if you've got to send an email you're feeling avoidant about, you might now write a few notes, get a large language model to turn it into paragraphs, and at the other end, unbeknownst to you, your reader may actually say, oh God, look at all those paragraphs, how do I schlep through that? And they may say, ChatGPT, reduce that to a few points for me. So
Gemini already does that. In
that's right. Yeah. The problem, I think, the problem with this notion that perhaps we can just move past this historic bottleneck of text by delegating it to artificial intelligence or to large language models, is that the large language models aren't very good in some respects. There are elements of thinking which they don't really capture. And I think one of the reasons that they don't capture it is because they're trained on text. And text, although you and I, with our imaginations and our experience of the world and the fact that we have hands and we've played around with things, we can look at text and recognize the meaning that another person has put into it. But we're only able to do that because we have such a rich experience of the world. The machine actually can't do that. It doesn't have hands. It doesn't have skin in the game. It hasn't kicked about trying to find a niche in life or protect a niche in life. And there are some specific gaps between what's central to thought, what's valuable and important in thought, and what large language models actually encode, largely because text just doesn't give them enough information. And I'll try to summarize the three main ones, as I see it.
The three main gaps.
The three main gaps.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, I'm used to thinking about this in terms that are sort of compacted and come from linguistics or something like that, but I just tried to unpack them a little bit. I mean, the first one is what I would call, technically I would call it propositional dependency, but all that really means is which points depend on which points. It's characteristic of human thought that we trade main points, main images, main techniques, and it's often not enough for us to just state the point baldly. Our audience might need a bit of clarification. So now we have some supporting points that expand the first image or the first point, give it a bit more detail, flesh it out until the point where the audience seems to be comfortable, where the audience we imagine, we guess would be comfortable. There's another problem, apart from clarity, which is confidence. Why should I believe this stuff? And similarly, the central point, the central claim that a speaker is making or a writer is making is often expanded a bit in moves towards reassurance, confidence, or fine-tuning. To what extent do we believe this? Is it just a question? Is this a guess?
This is what I'm saying, and this is why you should believe it.
This is why you should believe it, or this is the extent to which I think you should probably believe it sometimes. This is definitely you must believe it because experiment has shown, or a great an authoritative institution asserts, those kind of things.
Yeah, a podcaster I really like.
Yeah. Sorry?
A podcaster I really like.
A podcaster I really like said this. We know from the tale of Jack and Jill, we know from traditional stories.
As the scripture says.
As the scripture says, that's right. So there's these propositional dependencies are not there. Why do large language models fumble in getting those things clear? Simply because human texts rely on the readers having quite a lot of knowledge of the world. And they don't bother to spell out the relationship between 2 points. They don't say explicitly, okay, this is my main point, and it is supported by this, that, and that. They add points, and a human can tell that these are supporting a particular point.
You should just know that this is why it's relevant.
We've both lived in the world. We know how things work.
Yeah.
So as soon as I say this, you'll understand that I'm supporting or clarifying someone's point.
That's the classic example. It's like someone says, oh, the doorbell rang, and then the other person says, I'm in the bath.
Yeah.
And so you should just know, because I'm in the bath, I don't want to go get the doorbell.
That's right.
But like strictly speaking, computer logic might not understand what the connection is.
And so if we see a sequence of cartoons, there's a rabbit, there's a carrot. Next frame in the cartoon, the carrot has largely disappeared. And fourth frame, the rabbit is bouncing away, burping slightly. We read a narrative in there which depends on our knowledge of the world.
We understand the carrot's been eaten.
Yeah. Now, the large language models are built by adding token by token, word by word, or word part by word, a statistical model of correlation, which words turn up next to which words turn up in similar environments to each other, and are therefore interpreted as having similar meanings in some sense.
There's no actual understanding, it's just a really good simulacrum of understanding.
It is, it's a simulacrum of understanding, and it misses a lot of things that speakers and writers are making implicit. So the large language models are training on very lossy material. They're training on thin gruel. That underlies a lot of their limits. So that's propositional.
Thin gruel just means it's text. They're not training on the physical
It's not very
world.
rich food. Text is actually not very rich food.
Yeah.
Text comes to life in the presence of a reader. But on its own, as a token stream fed into a machine, it's a bit thin. It's thinner than we realize because we're so good at dealing with it.
And that's just inherent to text itself, because for us it evokes all these schemata and contexts and lived experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if history had given us, and we may have it in the future, if history had given us tree-like text, the nearest thing I can think of it is the Peruvian knotting systems that were sort of nested and would branch off and so on. But if text itself were tree-like, large language models would be much better now because they would have a much richer model.
They would understand about the structure of thought.
Yes, what depends on what.
Rather than just doing a good impression of thought.
That's right. They would have a much more reliable view of the underlying network of thought rather than the sequence of railway carriages. The text gives us. So that's propositional dependency. The second of three things that I think large language models are weak at, it's not entirely unrelated, is what I would call modality or tone. In other words, this focuses now less on the clarifications than on the persuasion, on the fine-tuning of the speaker or the writer's attitude to things. again, modality is quite weakly encoded by text, but we pick it up, we note the implications simply because we've had skin in the game and lived a human life. The third thing, and it's a crucial thing that
before we move into the third thing, so you're saying that, for instance, the large language model might not understand some of our modality about what we find important,
I don't think
and
they
it
do,
and it might be sort of wielding in an unskillful way modality, emphasizing things with a lot more certainty than it actually has a justification for.
Absolutely, and I think we can distinguish between the two different modes of a large language model, when it's understanding something and when it's producing. I think we've all had the experience, that we may not have brought it to words, that when we when we treat a large language model as if it was an oracle, as if it was a source of information or wisdom, and it gives an answer. It gives an answer in a very flatly assertive tone, and its self-confidence often turns out to be wrong. I don't know if, for example...
it'll say, well, this is the fact, and then you're like, actually, that's inherently not true, and obviously not true. And it's like, yes, you picked it, well done. In fact, this is true.
This is the right answer. And then you can get into a chain where in 10 steps, it again, each time asserts that it's now got the definitely right answer. Again, it fails. So they express a lot of confidence, whereas a human would, I would call it modalize, but let's call it fine-tune things much more subtly.
Good at hedging or softening.
Hedging, softening, indicating uncertainty, indicating very strong attachment, weaker attachment, indicating hostility to a point, saying, no, this is not one of our points, it's one of theirs. Or it's the point made by an institution that I don't like, that I resist.
I suppose part of that is commercial forces. Hey, it's market forces that mean that they want the large language model to be confident, and they want it to be clear, and they don't want it to sort of question the underpinnings of your original question. They don't want to say, hey, well, that's a rubbish question, you should be thinking about this instead.
That's exactly right.
They just want you to they want it to be a bit obsequious and a bit affirming.
Exactly, and I think you do very well to bring out this term obsequious, because actually one of the ways in which the different large language models in the market compete is to try to improve the user experience, and they know that a lot of users rather like to be flattered. Yeah. And so they can actually fine-tune the amount of sugar or treacle that comes out in the messages. Whoa, that was very insightful of you.
Yes, you've really
put your finger on it there. And I think there was a moment, particularly when the OpenAI product was trickled up so high and became so obsequious, and that users squirmed and they had to tone it down a little bit. So that again would be what I would call fine-tuning modality. It's really the interpersonal coloring of the material.
Yes.
Particularly the over-assertive nature of the claims.
And at the moment it's dialed in to serve market forces rather than truth necessarily.
Yes, absolutely. And because the reasons we went through before, when we're worrying about the thinness of the material they're working with and the lack of clarity they really have about what depends on what, it becomes particularly dangerous that in the presence of that real uncertainty, they're actually asserting a kind of confidence that's ill-grounded. I think there's a third element that's quite important, which is what I would call the representation of causality. What you have in a large language model is statistical weightings for words in a particular linguistic context. It's a model of the patterns in which words tend to occur next to each other. So there's a sort of a process of looking at the whole text so far and then predicting what the most likely next word is. It's very impressive. It produces text that looks very plausible at first. But in statistical terms, it's all about correlation. It's about knowing that certain things often turn up next to each other. And what that lacks is what was generally lacked by correlation. Generally in statistics, we're often reminded when we read statistics that correlation doesn't imply causality. When two things occur next to each other or frequently seen together, we don't actually know whether, we know that A and B are often noticed next to each other, but we don't know whether A causes B or whether B causes A.
Or whether C causes both of them.
Or C causes both of them.
Yeah.
Now, mathematically, it's better understood now how you get beyond that limitation and how you do measure causality. And you measure it by moving beyond observation to interaction.
Experimentation.
Experimentation. You discover whether the arrow from A to B is more causal or vice versa, and how strong they are, by poking the system. By
If I turn up this dial, then what happens?
what happens? Does something
Yeah.
else? If I tweak A, does B change?
Yeah,
To what extent does it change? And vice versa.
yeah,
Or if I tweak something else, do they both change?
Yes.
It's only by being in the world and playing around with it, like a child plays with toys or plays with the sand, tinkering, that we build up these models of the world which are specifically constructed of what you could think of as little arrows with a particular direction. This points to that, this affects that.
yeah.
To a certain degree, the arrow has a strength. Some things have weak effects on each other, some things have stronger effects on each other. So our intuitive knowledge of the world, human thought itself, is largely constructed from these networks of arrows with directions and strength. Now, a large language model simply doesn't and can't produce anything of that kind, but because all it has is observation. It can observe the streams of tokens in the world, the pictures it's fed, the text it's fed, but it doesn't have hands. It can't tweak the world. It can't poke around and find out which way causal arrows go. And so you're dealing with a system which sounds confident, as we said, but is actually built on very thin material and can't interact with the world. So in other words, these systems, although our whole economies are being structured at the moment by enormous capital investment in an assumption that we're going to be able to delegate language, possibly even thinking, to commercial machines. In the three fundamental areas of thought, the dependencies of claims, the interpersonal tone of those claims, the causal models of the world, it really doesn't grapple with them at all.
Yeah, because to summarize, the problem is it's trained on something that's linear, and thought isn't really linear.
Exactly.
And then the other one is there are pressures on it to be certain and to state things quite crudely or simply, but there's actually a way more nuance to truth.
Yes.
And then the third one is it doesn't have a direct interface with the world, so there's all kinds of contexts that it's lacking and models of causality that it just can't hope to understand.
Absolutely. And the middle one we can expand a little, because it's not only in its production that it's obsequious or overconfident, also in its reading of things, it again suffers from the poverty of text. It's not very good at picking up the nuances.
And that's because ultimately it's doing this thing, this probability act, where it says if this is the text, if this is the question, probably something like this is going to fit the bill.
Yeah.
Or if this is a sequence of words, probably this is the next word.
Yeah.
It's really kind of in the dark. I've got these limited jigsaw pieces, and I know what the jigsaw pieces usually are when they go together, but I don't actually know what they mean. But because we're humans and we're so good at anthropomorphizing, we see this wonderful magic trick, and we project a wise intelligence and an omnipotence there. And you're saying, hey, actually, we need to point out this thing isn't that.
Yeah.
It's something else entirely, and there could be some real problems from not seeing that clearly.
Exactly. It's giving us its impression of what is most likely to be said, but that's not the same as what is most likely to be real.
Yeah.
Most likely to happen.
I'm thinking about my marionette string puppet.
Yes.
And how really it's quite crude. It's just there's a few strings and this little puppet. But when you play it in the right way, something to do with the coordination of the voice and the hands, and then like the random movements of the puppet, you can project quite easily a living creature into that has sovereignty and intelligence and things. Yes. And the effect is quite uncanny. Like it really blows kids away, and even like some adults too. It's like, whoa, that's eerie. That I feel like that's a thing. I know it's not, but it feels like it's a thing. And that illusion is really compelling. And it feels like there's some overlap there. There's maybe something compelling illusion.
I think so. I mean, we're very good at anthropomorphization, and it's lucky that we are. To quite a large extent, it sounds silly, but I think we anthropomorphize each other and ourselves. In other words, we read each other as persons. Perhaps a surgeon has to read a person as a system anesthetized on a table, but generally we don't do that. And the fact that we are able to behave well towards each other sympathetically, constructively, depends on anthropomorphization. It's an absolutely central role to interpret something complex as a person.
To take all these disparate kind of facts and impressions and knowledge and experiences and observations in the real moment, and then weave that into a whole, and basically create a model of mind, right? A theory of mind,
a theory of
psychology.
Mind, yes. But our theory of the large language models mind is over generous, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. There's another aspect to thought, which is that, look, in my experience, it can be instantaneous. You can know something in the flash. There can be sort of a realization of something.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I see the shape of it.
Yes.
For me, it's like the experience is, I understand something wholly and in a single flash of insight. And then if I was to write about it, there's a lot of text that needs to go into that. But there's another bit that's it seems like that's what's going on, but that's not what's going on.
Yeah.
With AI.
I think that's right. I think that a person has these flashes of insight in which, after long cooking, suddenly there's a move to a different level of abstraction. Various things are coalesced together into something richer and more abstract. And I think that summary or abstraction is not something that large language models are equipped to produce. When we do summary, there are two forms of summary, which are sort of mixed together, but that's useful to separate them briefly, just to think about it. One of them is simply deletion. In other words, you summarize a text, you summarize your view of things, you summarize your first draft by putting a line through all the words you don't need, or perhaps through some of the sentences you decide you don't need. So that's pure deletion. The large language models can do that. If you ask them to summarize, they perform a deletion summary.
Okay.
What they're not as well equipped to do, because they don't actually have concepts, they only have word distribution patterns, is the second kind of summary, in which you take a row of maybe 3 points and you suddenly notice that actually those 3 logically linked points can be represented with a single point in a slightly different language, in slightly different terms, with slightly more abstract generalization that has just occurred to you. Large language models don't do that. And that is closely related to the sort of the spark of insight, our ability to reframe a question, to see things in different terms, to create new images for ourselves, and to reinterpret some existing stuff in terms of a coherent image that integrates.
It's actually a true synthesis, or the creation of some new insight.
Yeah,
they can appear to do that because they can say, oh, hey, when people have talked about these kinds of things in the past, this metaphor has often come up. So it can offer a metaphor, and you say, oh, wow, well done, yeah, that was a good pattern match.
So if there's a linguistic record of that kind, of people in the archive having replaced a sequence of images with some overarching one, they can find it, but they can't produce new ones of their own.
Not truly original.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's like these 3 points give us a roadmap of what humans can focus on and what we need to be good at in order to sort of fill in the gaps, or to not be hoodwinked or not get over dependent on these things. We need to be better at being really clear about the structure of thought, and these, like the nested tree structure of
what supports
ideas.
What's the distinguishing between a key point and supporting points, and focusing also, we haven't really talked about this, on the logical links between supporting points, on the ands and the buts and the so's. And
what are the connections here? What's the connective tissue of this argument or something?
That's right. Yes. Yeah. I mean, the argument is actually bound together. It's collagen, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Sinews actually consist of link words. So there are particular images and claims. They're linked together with and or but, therefore, nevertheless, those kind of. If you cut those, if you lose those, then you lose the thread of the whole thing. The thread of text, the thread of thinking, is those link words. And one of the problems for large language models is that speakers very often don't bother to say but or and, because they know it'll be obvious to a human who has the same experience of the world that they do, so they don't put them in. Conference interpreters will often find themselves explicitly supplying them to make life easier for an audience. But for a large language model, it's simply not there. They don't have experience of the world, and so their sense of the coherence of what's being said is much weaker than us, or much less reliable than us.
Yeah. Well, I'm hearing like these LLMs, they're really good at giving the appearance of thinking, and they can do some grunt work for us. They're wonderful at processing massive amounts of data at once, and they can make things faster and easier for us.
They're a very good form of search, for one thing.
Yeah, but what we need to make sure we're really good at is knowing how to think, and how to think is about understanding the structure of thoughts and arguments and stories and propositions and rhetoric, so that we see what's supported by what, and we see what the dodgy weak links are, or what the actual kind of fictitious or dishonest links are. people are trying to say that this supports that, but when we look at it closely, we realize, oh, actually, that's not such a strong proposition.
And we have to think hard about whether a point is supported at all, because in the age of social media, there's an enormous traffic in simply making a claim without supporting it in any way at all, without giving evidence.
Yes.
Is there experimental evidence? Are there institutions that endorse this, or have I just said it?
Yeah.
And the sheer flood of material that a human is now expected to process is enormous. It's overwhelming. There was a time before the digital networks where there were institutions that sort of filtered what got into print. Of course, some rubbish was printed, but generally speaking, if you saw something in print, there were even jokes about it, you would know that an editor had been through this. You would know that there were institutional processes that would have filtered out really silly, worthless stuff. And so it meant that as a reader of newspapers, as a consumer of things coming out of universities, a lot of the work was being done for you. The gatekeeping, the filtering, the summary perhaps.
The digestion almost, yeah.
But that's all fallen away now. The digital floods have swept all that away like sandcastles. And we're left as individuals flooded, drowning almost in an incredible flood of low quality claims and statements.
You get clickbait like, doctors don't want you to know this weird secret for fat loss, and it's like
this one weird trick.
Yeah. And so part of being good at thinking is being able to say, okay, doctors, what does that mean exactly? What studies are you pointing to? Who's the authority here? What's this based on? Is it relevant to me actually? That's right.
So I think a kind of a cheeky, skeptical capacity for summary is a very important thing. Summary, a delicate capacity not only to be clear about what your main point is, but to elaborate it creatively, sensitively for particular readerships. Elaborate it for clarity, elaborate it for confidence. And thirdly, you have to live life. You have to build up a sense of what causes what. What is the network of causal arrows? Pigeons sometimes, pigeons form strange hypotheses. If a piece of bread landed near them just at the same time that they lifted up the left foot, they'll go on lifting up the left foot in the hope that more bread will come.
Superstitions.
That's right. You know the Chinese story about somebody who was sweating in the midday sun, ploughing with his oxen, and suddenly, the corner of his eye, he notices a fox chasing a rabbit. The chase becomes wild, and the poor rabbit knocks itself out on a rock. So the guy abandons his plowshare, chases the fox away, retrieves the rabbit, and takes it home for supper. And after that day, instead of ploughing, he just sits by the rock, waiting for more rabbits.
For the magical rock to provide.
That's right, yeah. So he formed a rather weak sense of the network of causal arrows in the world.
Worshipping at the altar of this rock worked before. So
that's right. And the story says his crop failed and things got difficult that winter. Yeah.
So it's like we got to be really good at being skeptical. We got to be really good at being clear. What is this actually saying, and where's this actually coming from?
Extracting the gist.
What's the gist?
Extracting the gist, assessing the gist.
And then we got to be good at also expressing modality clearly. Hey, so how true do I feel this is, or how much confidence do I feel like I'm able to give to this? What quality of evidence do we actually have for this? And then the third one is staying grounded in the real world and remembering that there's baseline reality is what tells us about causality, not necessarily LLMs.
Right. And of course, in the previous discussion we were talking about the way in which the map is not the territory. I think that the first thing one should, as one approaches any text or listens to anything, one should assume it's probably nonsense. Unless there's good reason to think otherwise, because the great danger in life is certainty. Too much certainty creates bad interpersonal relations, leads people into bad plans. You have to be quite cautious. Nature doesn't yield its secrets easily. Tracking is not easy. It's a skilled process.
Yeah. We want a little bit of that Jeremy Paxman style. Who is this bastard and why are they lying to me?
I think so.
But not so much, I guess, that we sort of armor off and we
don't
close off the
yourself.
Possibility of connection and trust.
It's a fine-tuned skill.
I suppose part of it is just understanding that truth, being completely true and upright is not always the perspective that people are coming from. Or they might think it is, but there's other agendas at play, and we need to know what the agendas are.
Yes.
That's going to bias.
Absolutely. And of course, language and claims serve two different purposes. Sometimes they are communicative. People are genuinely trying to share their understanding of the world. But sometimes it's more symbolic. It's like a totem pole or a flag that's being waved. It's an act of identification. This is what my people say. And anything that sounds like what those other people say is by definition to be resisted. Yes. We don't bother to check its relationship to the world, but we do know it's our flag versus their flag.
Because its function in that moment is supporting a kind of tribalism. This is what we say, and this is what we stand for. That's what they say and what they stand for.
Yeah, it's not about knowledge, it's not epistemic, it's totemic. It's about flags, totem poles, group identities. Yeah.
It's like a uniform or an insignia almost.
Yeah. And, that's fine. People do pay an entry price for membership of a group. But you have to continually check that you're not paying too high a price, that you're not abandoning your sense of what's real, what's probable.
Am I genuinely getting a good deal here?
Yeah, am I getting a good deal?
Or am I just sacrificing myself on the altar of something
that's right.
That's actually parasitic or toxic?
Yes. And I think that all of this suggests possibilities in education. I mean, I think that schools are in a state of shock. They used to rely on this institution of the essay in various subjects, but now the kids will know that you get an essay out of a large language model, partly or completely. The teachers sort of know that, but they're not quite sure what to do about it or how to respond to it. And I think that probably we have to say that the essay really has to be quietly put aside, and we have to think about other practices and skills which will develop people's sense of the difference between topic and a point, being able to sort of make a clear point about some material, getting a sense of how you support, how you clarify a point, what's the difference between a key point and a supporting point. Being sensitive to the interpersonal elements of language beyond what large language models do. And there's a danger because large language models, by always sounding so certain, will encourage that in others. The children will think you have to sound defiantly certain about any claim that you make, angrily shout it rather than sort of think about how confident you really feel.
Yeah.
And as you say, interact with the world. You understand that really the only way of learning anything, in the last analysis, is through experiments. It's playing around with things or benefiting from experiments conducted by others.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I think about Tom Brown's quote, do something, even if it's wrong.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, underlying all this, we haven't spelled it out, but it's very central, is the fact that text has, for a long time, since at least the late 17th century, been a central currency of trust. A sort of culture of fact emerged at that time.
If it's written down.
If it was written down, and if it had been through the printing press, then we're pretty confident about it.
But I read it in a book.
Yeah. And it started, in England at least, in the 1640s with wartime conditions. There was a huge appetite for printed material. People would buy these little newspapers because they kind of needed to know which armies were where and how close were they getting to the town they lived in. But text as a currency of trust is terribly undermined by the digital networks. In a way, it's failed. It's gone. We used to complain, I remember in the 1980s in universities, that wicked power used to filter out discourse. It used to limit the sayable. Now, perhaps we feel even a little nostalgic for that because perhaps anybody can publish any nonsense and does so all the time throughout the day. So,
please give me less.
Yeah, the dams have burst. The filtering has ended, and we're all struggling to swim.
I think there was even some of that in the early days of the internet. Hey, it's like, well, I saw that online,
exactly.
So it must be true, and then that faded pretty quick.
Yeah. So that's one of the things people turn to language for trust, and trust of any kind. You need money is one form of trust, but trust is the fundamental currency of human life. And if the old forms of trust are failing, then we need to think about how we build new forms of trust and what good bedrock would be.
I'm thinking about school again. I'm wondering if maybe like a school assignment might be, rather than read this book and write an essay about it, it might be something like read this book and then write a tree diagram or a mind map.
I think that would be very helpful. I mean, I find those tree diagrams very useful. Tree diagrams with a path through them, because your thinking is nested, tree-like, typically, or at least net-like. And then to communicate to another person, because words come out of your mouth sequentially and words go onto paper and sequentially, you then choose a particular path through the tree-like structure. And the path you choose expresses in a way an interpersonal strategy. Do you move from the details at the bottom, which might be plausible facts, gradually up towards a conclusion because you anticipate resistance and you want to prepare the ground well before you make your central claim? Or are you dealing with people who just want to know some technical stuff you have? They have confidence in you, so you start with the main claim and then you make it clear, and if there are any questions about it, then you elaborate for confidence and more clarity.
Yeah, it's funny.
So choosing a path is a very important skill.
Yeah. So reading something complex and then writing the tree diagram, that would demonstrate that I really understood this. I see what the structure of this is.
Yes.
But then also we want to learn that interpersonal skill of how do I take you on a journey so that you can come to know this structure as well, and I'll introduce you to the shape of this. Yeah. And there's different ways I can pick that.
That's right.
But if it feels like if the school kids were able to do that, if they were able to summarize well and see the structure of things, and then be able to do this nice storytelling bit where they can convey that structure in a coherent and relevant way to someone else.
Coherent and relevant, and the relevance means that actually you may not visit the whole tree, because for some audiences you only need to go quickly through the top of it, and they'll grok the whole thing. Just
a light touch here and there. Yeah.
For other audiences, they'll need more clarification, or if they're a more skeptical audience, they'll need more reassurance, more grounding.
And that if our kids were able to do this, able to look at something complex, see the shape of it, and then communicate that shape to someone else in a way that was appropriate.
Yes.
That would be pretty useful meta skill.
Those would be very useful meta skills, and it raises the question of whether we are going through a sort of a crisis in the life of text. Text begins in cuneiform sort of 5,000 years ago as a sequence of syllables, actually, little symbols that represent syllables. There are no gaps between them. There are no word boundaries. There are no full stops. There are no paragraphs. Maybe sometimes there's a big line where something is completely completed. They drew a line across the clay. And because that is so far from the structure of thought in a way has been bubbling through ever since, and different cultures have introduced different forms of segmentation. We got word boundaries emerging, sentence boundaries, paragraphs. Not quite the same strategy everywhere in the world, but always some sort of segmentation is emerging. It may be that now, if we think that the digital networks are going to survive the current crises, then we can perhaps use screens constructively to create a new form of text which is more tree-like, where if you see a claim being made on the internet, you can always click for the underpinning. Okay, you're saying that, but what's the basis of that? You should immediately be able to see that expanded. And if there turns out to be nothing there, you'll just know it's a rubbish claim.
Yeah, in other words, we want to sort of do away with gatekeeping and move towards more transparency, to be able to say, well, actually, this is the foundation on which I'm making this claim.
Yes.
This is the basis.
And that gatekeeping used to be done by individuals, or the filtering used to be done by institutions, Now it has to be done by the individual. And so I think the individual needs more help in the nature of text itself. If you see a series of paragraphs, you should be able to click something to see, okay, what is the tree structure under that?
Yeah. What's being based on what? What's supporting what?
Yeah.
And what's the overall point that you're wanting to make here in summary?
We all know from our experience of books and papers that we have a habit of glancing at the beginning and the end, because we hope that they will have reached their mountaintop. They'll either be departing from their mountaintop at the beginning or reach it at the end. And we should get some sort of gist there, but really you should be able to see the gist straight away, and then go back to any elaboration you want. Of course, this is difficult because writers of text have always made use, to some extent, or been able to make use of the fact that text is a bit opaque. It does take quite a lot of spade work to get through, and sometimes they're kind of slightly hiding what they're up to.
Yeah.
I think we have to move beyond that. I think we have to give up the ability to do that.
Yeah.
And go for text that really is more explicit, more upfront, more transparent. You can see the bones straight away. You just click to see the tree structure and see the path that's been taken through it, and see maybe which parts of it in this version, these paragraphs I'm looking at, which parts of the tree are there, but the path didn't visit them.
Yeah. Yeah, because in this day and age now, if there's a book I see that's of interest, I just say, hey, ChatGPT, tell me what this book says in summary.
Yes.
And then it gives me the gist. Yeah. So then now it's like the book, I would only buy that book now if I like that gist enough that I wanted to have a bit more of the fleshing out, or I wanted to see a little bit more information about the studies that underpinned it.
Yeah. And of course, the sad thing about that is that if you had gone to the book directly, if it happened to be a good one, you might have read it in a different way from other people. Everybody has a slightly different interaction with the book, with the text. What you're seeing in ChatGPT or whoever it happens to be, Gemini or something like that, is first of all deletion summary, but also deletion summary both of the text itself and of the set of things that have been said about it. They'll be drawing in statistical weightings from any commentary material that's observed online. So there's a kind of a pressure towards conformity.
Yeah.
Once people are dependent on these things, new readings, new insights are kind of pushed into the margins if you're over dependent on them.
Whereas if I'd let myself go on the journey and actually read the book, there might be insights that were unique to me. Or, this little moment there resonated, or I just had this aha moment in that moment that I wouldn't have got just from this digested.
That's right. And I use, personally I use Gemini at the moment to do those kind of things for a quick search, sometimes just to get a sense of a book. But I have to say that the more I'm asking about something I actually know about, the lower the quality turns out to be.
The more obvious it is that it's
the more it's
not
a
that
kind
great.
of a well-worn cliche path. The cliches are sometimes wrong, but it's so well-worn on the internet that that's what you're going to be told by the large language
this is
model.
pretty shallow waters, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's such a need for people to be taught how to think. I mean, that's how I'm kind of thinking about this whole conversation is we have these machines, this software that does a good impression of thinking. It's not actually thinking. And because of that, we need to get really good at doing what the real thinking, the essence of thinking is, which is summarizing deeply and clearly with analysis and creativity and insight, and then communicating that in a rich way. We need to be extra good at that so that we don't become completely dependent on something and all of our thinking becomes quite shallow and vanilla. And just hoodwinked by market forces.
And I think, just to underpin a bit this point, if you want to get a sense of how limited the modeling of the thinking really is in the large language model, ask a large language model to draw you one of these diagrams. A propositional dependency diagram with the key point at the center and the main point at the center, and then the supporting points logically linked, and underneath those supporting points of the supporting points, and so on recursively. They just can't do it. Even at the moment, I mean, I haven't done it this morning, but I do it periodically. I sometimes ask a large language model to draw me a clear picture of a bicycle with well-labeled parts. It's comic what comes out. They just don't have a theory of
it's gibberish, hey, it's surreal. Yeah.
They know about things that are parts of bicycles, and they've got a rough impression of how they statistically seem to be closely linked to each other, but they don't have a theory of what a bicycle is, how it works. The labels are absurd. The bicycle itself, you wouldn't want to ride.
Yeah.
So if we skim over those sort of three ways in which large language models fail to represent the wealth of thought or the structure of thought, propositionally you can train people to draw these tree diagrams, to read a text and get a sense of what the gist is and what its tree-like structure is. Interpersonally, you can teach them to help them to develop the skill in taking a path through a tree, a path that's suitable for a particular context and audience.
Which might be something like storytelling.
Storytelling, yeah.
Present it like that.
I think something, yeah. Narrative structure is definitely, well, a narrative path is a very good name for what I'm talking about. And thirdly, the issue of causality, which can only be resolved by experiment, really means that probably we should be, children in schools, uncertain of quite how the future is going to develop, should be spending more time making things, experimenting, developing craft skills, carpentry, all of those things.
Physical, really mechanical intelligence.
Then symbolic work. I mean, some of us are specialists in numbers and maths, and we're always going to benefit from deductive skills like that, the abstract symbolic skills. But I think only a subset of kids really need to be very good at that.
Mm-hmm.
But even the kids who are doing mathematical work also need to be good experimentalists. I think people need to understand what experiment is.
Yeah.
And have positive experience of it.
And I suppose if the kids are tinkering in the world and doing experiments and making things, but only in a human-made environment, there's a kind of blindness and an amnesia there too. Hey? It's important, extra important to be having that nature time and discovering reality in a way that's unmediated by the human mind.
Absolutely. I just think the richness of the nervous system requires organic, natural complexity and real situations of challenge. You're not going to get that in 4 square walls.
Yeah.
With a light bulb.
If I'm just doing woodworking in the woodworking shop, I just see the world in terms of like hammers and nails and things like that. But if I get to go out into the forest and I see the wood growing, there's a different relationship to the wood then.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How do I select things to make an arrow with or to make fire with? What works and what doesn't?
And I suppose the poetry and beauty, it's not just this substrate that I hammer away on and file away on. It's like there's this sense of, oh, okay, this is what it means to be part of a living community.
That's right.
As I walk through this forest.
Yeah. And it requires thought and skill and collective creative effort. I can remember being subjected myself, I think in the 1970s, to an attempt to introduce something like experiment into chemistry and physics classes. But this was before the mathematics of causality was well developed and understood. And they were really teaching us sort of an empiricist fallacy, this misunderstanding about experiment. And the theory was that you would go into the lab and you would perform what was called an experiment, which was a kind of a ritual with certain materials, and you would observe the values. And from those values would pop out mysteriously the theory that Newton had found, or that Kekulé had found, or something like that. Actually, it just simply doesn't work like that. It's a much more complex process. Things go wrong. The insight often comes, in a dream, in a creative, very, very long-cooked creative leap that has been enormously informed by intense reflection, experiment, things going wrong, trying
again. It's actually quite a mysterious process.
It's a very mysterious process, yeah.
The insight and clarity and revelation.
Yeah.
I like the idea of it being a ritual. First we add this ingredient, then we add this much.
That's right.
And then, hey presto.
Well, that went back to a crisis which in the crisis of knowledge in the 1640s, after the Reformation, when confidence in Holy Scripture as a source of authority had gone, people were a bit worried about what was going to replace it. But it's another moment where the currency of trust had vanished. And Boyle, famous for his gas experiments and gas laws in the gardens of Wadham College in Oxford, bought a lot of expensive equipment. He had estates in Ireland. And he had decided that the way to get confidence, to get things that everybody could agree on were definitely true, was to understand that nature itself was the mind of God, and that if you conducted very, very careful experiments using all of the rituals of the law court, with witnesses, careful annotation, record keeping, definite procedures and rituals, writing everything down, making sure everyone agreed that you hadn't fudged it, then you could somehow find out what was real and what was true. Now, there was a lot of value in that. There was a lot of advance.
Better than just taking someone's word for it.
Better than taking his word. And actually, the style of note-taking that Boyle used in those gardens became the modern scientific paper. But what was missing, really, was this notion that you have to intervene in a system. You have to poke it and tinker it. Experiment is actually just a posh word for child's play. Children are the ultimate experimentalists. They're completely unconstrained. They're very imaginative. They play with a kind of delight and curiosity. And adult experimentation in any field really has to aspire to something like that if it's going to be productive.
It's very simple in essence. It was just we ask what if, and then we just try things out.
That's right.
See what happens.
Yeah, that didn't work. Let's try something else. Yeah.
What's that?
That didn't work. Let's try something else.
Yeah.
Or ouch, won't do that again.
But then alongside that, kind of in the background, almost invisibly, is this quite mysterious process of reflection, synthesis, assimilation, and there's a creative aspect to that, where we're not just observing and getting revelation from our observations. We're observing, and then we're making stories in our head about what might be going
Absolutely.
on behind that. And that's making the stories in my head is a very creative process that comes from inside as well as outside.
Exactly. It is terribly mysterious. We really don't know much about it. And Einstein famously, as you know, said that imagination was the central human gift.
Mm-hmm.
And that sometimes, in his view, you would be so certain with an insight that you had that you should respect it, because actually, even if the experiments at first seem to be going wrong, the fault is probably in your experimental method. And if you go on trying, you'll find that actually, after all, it's right. You know, trust your imagination, take it seriously, give it a chance experimentally.
Nice. Yeah. And I suppose along with imagination, we could say intuition, which is the felt sense of the internal reality. And then really what we're talking about is the nervous system's very rich ability to model the world.
And the long period you have spent interacting with the world in order to build those models. Yeah. All the things you've done.
And the more we actually interact with the world, the richer that model is. And the less, the cruder it becomes, and more full of dead ends.
The better our questions get. I mean, that's the real nature of science, is to improve the quality of the questions we're asking. We never get the answers. The map never becomes the territory. But we can go on improving the questions through hard work.
Mm-hmm. Our model will never become exactly as complex as the thing itself.
But it can become more and more useful.
We can aspire to that, and good things happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whenever we talk about science, I always think about tracking, which I kind of wonder if that was the origins of science in a way, as well as the origins of lots of other things too, because you can have humans wandering around, bumping into animals, but it's not until humans are able to look at marks on the ground and then infer from that. They sort of, I use my imagination to project the movement of the animal into that mark on the ground. And if I have seen enough marks on the ground, I can see how fresh that mark is, and I can even tell how fast that animal is moving, or maybe even what state it was in, or where its attention was.
Yeah.
And then I can start to project with my felt sense and my imagination where it might be now, and how I might be able to trap it, or how I might be able to hunt it successfully.
Exactly. And better readings lead to supper. Traded with others.
Yes.
Less successful readings lead to hunger.
Yeah.
So you try something else the next day.
It's very real.
It's very real.
And I moved from just reading one word at a time, one footprint at a time, to being able to read sentences and paragraphs. And then from there, the entire landscape becomes storied. It's like reading the book of nature, is the phrase.
That's right.
And that's when reality becomes a kind of a text.
Becomes a text, the
or
ground
story.
is a text, reality is a text. We can read it, we can improve the questions we put to it, improve the quality of our map, and make maps that serve us better. Keep our tummies full.
I was taught that the heart of tracking is the sacred question. Something like, what is this teaching us? What is this telling us? What can I learn from this?
And I think all of these notions of the sacred are very important, central and helpful, because they encourage a kind of humility in us and a caution that we don't get too cocky. We don't imagine that we're living in the map. We understand we're living in something that is a bit mysterious, a bit beyond our full grasp.
Yeah.
And it needs continual alertness and
but
work.
That coming to know the mystery more intimately, or to sort of connect with more aspects of the mystery, there's something inherently beautiful and wonderful and useful in that.
Life enhancing.
Yeah, but it's not really an ending.
It's not an ending.
It is.
And of course that's a delicate issue in the role of the sacred in bonding us together. We share a sense of awe. We have to continually keep that awe fresh, not allow it to fossilize into some map that somebody is using as their personal property.
Now I have a book that
and you
substitutes my sense of awe.
Yes.
Yeah, and you'll feel the proper. If you read it properly, you'll feel the awe. If you haven't read it properly, you won't feel the awe.
Yeah, shared book reading can be very
Yeah.
creative, and but you need to be asking questions, not ruling on answers.
Yeah. that it's the process rather than the destination.
Yes,
Eh?
yeah. The quality of the process and the questions that are asked.
We'll leave it there.
Yeah.
Did you?
That's fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Very helpful for me, actually. Whether we made any sense to others, but
What's that?
we know each other well, so whether we made sense to others, I don't know. But
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Thank you. I hope the C proved filterable.
If it's
I hope the C didn't baffle
yeah,
it
yeah,
too
we'll
much.
see. Hey. So how should we wrap this up?
Sorry?
How should we wrap this up?
Yeah.
We're walking along the beach right now. Hey, you said made you think of Newton's quote.
Yes, I was just thinking about the way that Newton described himself, despite his enormous contributions to our insights about the natural world. He said that in his own view, he was really just like a child on the beach, noticing a pretty pebble or a more interesting shell, while all the while the great ocean of the unknown roared beyond. And I think that that captures very nicely just how creative it is to be aware of how little we actually understand. That to do real work, you have to always keep curiosity alive and guard against certainty. Curiosity and imagination and continuous play and experiment bring quite extraordinary rewards. And as we walk along, I'm also thinking I'm on my way to an aeroplane. I'm flying back from 3 weeks with you, back up to London. And conscious perhaps more than ever of how much parents learn from children, and how much I've learned from you.
Oh, that's kind.
And inevitably remembering the very first moment when you were born and I held you. Large, irreducibly a creature, still covered in blood, responding to the world for the first time. And just how little of this was really intelligible, Parents sometimes think that they are the authors of children, but children come from such a deep and mysterious place that we really don't grasp at all.
Yeah.
It's been very good to see you in your environment, in your landscape, with your children at play. Delightful moments as you throw your smallest up into the air and she somersaults and splashes into a river with squeals of delight.
Yeah.
And to read stories to your thoughtful elder child.
Yeah, she's going to miss those stories. It's been almost like your job reading stories to her.
Well,
hours
me
every
too.
night, hours every morning.
It's such a privilege to read a story to a child and to adapt as you go, to notice their reaction.
Picking the pathway.
Yeah. And I'm delighted that your path has led you here.
Yeah, pretty lucky.
I always thought it would be nice for children to grow up in Australia.
You're saying it reminded you of your...
Yes,
time
my
as a child in South
childhood is
Africa.
in South Africa, and I sort of tried in my 30s, as you will remember, to go back, take you all there. But South Africa is a less blessed place, much more difficult problems, more poverty, less security. It's a dangerous place now. I think this is a larger and much more human-friendly landscape.
We just have to let Cara, your partner, know that it's not filled with spiders. She'll be able to come next time.
Yes, my poor partner, she didn't come. She thinks Australia crawls with spiders. I think I've barely seen a spider in the last 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But we'll have to find ways of encouraging her to come. I think she would like to visit and perhaps even to live here.
That'd be nice. Well, thanks, Dad. It's been good to have this
Well, thank you for the last 3
Time with
weeks. It's
you.
been such a blessing.
Yeah.
I've learned so much and enjoyed our conversation so much, and had such fun with your
There were lots of
family.
times I wish we had the microphones rolling, but we managed to get a couple of conversations
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Leave it there. Yeah.